US Route 50 in Nevada is officially known as the loneliest road in America. It's a title it earned for a reason. Once you leave the neon glow of Reno behind, there is nothing but hundreds of miles of dead, pitch-black desert, ancient mountain ranges, and a suffocating, absolute silence. I accepted a 4-hour ride request around midnight simply because the payout was massive. The drop-off was a small, nearly abandoned mining town near the Utah border. The pickup was at a desolate, rundown motel on the outskirts of the city. The passenger's name in the app was simply Seth. When I pulled into the flickering, moth-swarmed light of the motel parking lot, Seth was already waiting. He was standing completely motionless by the ice machine. He wore a heavy, faded flannel shirt and dark jeans, but it was his posture that caught my attention. It was unnervingly stiff. His arms hung rigidly at his sides, perfectly straight, like a window mannequin. I unlocked the doors. He didn't bend down to look through the window. He just opened the rear door and slid into the back seat in one smooth, almost mechanical motion. "Hey Seth, how's it going?" I asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Got a long drive ahead of us tonight." Seth didn't respond immediately. He sat dead center in the back seat, his hands resting flat on his knees. He was staring straight ahead, his eyes fixed on the back of my headrest. In the dim light of the cabin, his face looked strangely smooth, almost devoid of texture, and his eyes were wide and completely unblinking. "Ahead of us tonight," a voice whispered from the back seat. I frowned, adjusting the mirror. It was Seth, but his voice was totally flat, devoid of any emotion or natural inflection. He hadn't just agreed with me. He had perfectly repeated the last 4 words of my sentence. Yeah, just make sure your seatbelt is buckled," I said, putting the car in drive and pulling out onto the empty highway. "Seatbelt is buckled," Seth whispered again. A cold chill crawled up my spine. It was a bizarre, deeply unsettling, nervous tic. I decided to stop trying to make small talk. I turned the radio to a low volume, letting the soft murmur of a late-night talk show fill the silence, and focused on the dark, endlessly straight road ahead. The only light was the cone of my high beams slicing through the desert blackness. For the first 2 hours, the ride was agonizingly quiet. Every time I checked the rearview mirror, Seth was in the exact same position. He hadn't shifted his weight. He hadn't looked out the window, and I swear I never once saw him blink. Around 2:15 a.m., my phone buzzed on the dashboard mount. It was my wife, Elena. The Bluetooth automatically connected, routing the call through the car's speakers. "Hey, honey." Elena's tired, warm voice filled the cabin. "Sorry to call so late. I just woke up and saw you weren't home yet. Are you okay out there?" The sound of her voice was a massive relief, breaking the suffocating tension in the car. "I'm totally fine, Elle," I smiled. "I picked up a long fare heading east. The money is great, but I won't be back until sunrise. Go back to sleep." "Okay, drive safe, please. The desert is creepy at night. I love you." "I love you too. See you in the morning," I said, tapping the screen to end the call. The cabin plunged back into the quiet hum of the tires on the asphalt. I took a deep breath, feeling a little more grounded. Then, from the pitch-black back seat, the silence was broken. "I love you too. See you in the morning." My heart stopped dead in my chest. I slammed both hands onto the steering wheel. It wasn't Seth's flat, monotone voice. It was Elena's voice. The exact pitch, the exact warmth, the exact sleepy cadence of my wife. It was a flawless, impossible replication coming from the throat of the man sitting 2 feet behind me. I nearly swerved off the highway. The tires hit the shoulder's rumble strip with a violent, vibrating brrrt, sending a shockwave through the steering wheel before I violently jerked the car back into the center lane. My chest was heaving, cold sweat instantly breaking out across my forehead. I looked up at the rearview mirror, my eyes wide with panic. In the shadows, Seth was still sitting dead center, his stiff posture entirely unchanged by the car's sudden swerve. "How did you do that?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a chaotic mixture of anger and sheer primal terror. "Is that some kind of app? A recording?" Seth didn't answer. He just stared at the back of my head. "Answer me," I yelled. The absolute isolation of the Nevada desert suddenly felt like a crushing physical weight. There were no other headlights for miles, no gas stations, no cell service, just me and him in a rolling metal box. Crushing physical weight, Seth whispered from the darkness. But this time, it wasn't Elena's voice, it was my voice. It wasn't just a similar pitch or a good impression. It was an exact, flawless clone of the way my voice sounded when I was terrified. It captured the slight rasp in my throat, the panicked breathing, the exact cadence of my syllables. "Stop it," I commanded, my hands gripping the leather wheel so hard my knuckles popped. "Stop it," my own terrified voice echoed back from the dark. I reached up and violently flicked on the cabin's overhead dome light, flooding the interior with a harsh, yellow glare. I looked directly into the rearview mirror, determined to turn around and confront whatever sick, twisted prank this guy was pulling. When I saw his face under the bright light, all the air completely left my lungs. Seth's face was shifting. That was the only way to describe it. The smooth, pale skin I had noticed at the motel was rippling and crawling, like wet clay being rapidly molded from the inside by invisible hands. I could hear the horrifying, wet sounds of cartilage snapping and bone cracking as his jaw widened. His cheekbones shifted higher on his face. His dark hair was visibly receding and lightening, turning into the exact shade of my light brown hair. He was looking right at my reflection in the mirror. He still wasn't blinking. But as I watched in absolute paralyzing horror, his lips slowly curled upward into a smile. It was the exact same nervous, lopsided smile I had used when I took my driver's license photo. He was wearing my face. It wasn't a mask. It was an impossible, biological replication, but trapped in the uncanny valley. The eyes were just a little too far apart, the skin too flawless, the smile too wide. "What the hell are you?" I choked out, tears of pure, unadulterated panic stinging my eyes. Instinctively, I slammed my hand down on the master lock button on the driver's door, completely forgetting that the threat was already inside the car. The creature in the back seat tilted its head, my head, to the side. The joints in its neck popped with a sickening wet crunch. "What the hell are you?" it asked, speaking in my voice. But the tone had changed. The fear was gone. It was replaced by a dark, eager curiosity, accompanied by a smile that slowly parted to reveal teeth that were far too sharp and far too numerous to be human. The creature wearing my face leaned forward, pressing its chest against the back of my seat. I could feel the unnatural heat radiating from its body through the leather, and the heavy, wet sound of its breathing right next to my ear. "See you in the morning," it whispered. The voice was mine, but the cadence was completely broken, dragging out the syllables like a skipping record. "See you in the morning, Elena." It wasn't just stealing my voice and my face, it was stealing my life. It was practicing how to go home to my wife. "Get away from me!" I screamed, blindly throwing my right elbow backward. I struck something that felt like a solid block of ice wrapped in wet leather. The creature didn't flinch. Instead, a long, impossibly pale hand reached over the passenger seat. The fingers were at least 2 inches too long, tipped with jagged yellowed nails. It gently traced the outline of the dashboard, marveling at the car. I looked at the speedometer. We were doing 85 miles per hour in the pitch-black desert. If I let go of the wheel to fight it, we would roll the car and die. But if I kept driving, it would simply wait until we reached the abandoned mining town to finish the job and take my keys. I had a 2-ton weapon at my disposal, and I was strapped into it. The creature wasn't. I didn't give it a warning. I gripped the steering wheel with bone-crushing force, braced my entire body against the seat, and slammed both feet onto the brake pedal with every ounce of strength I had. The heavy sedan shrieked like a dying animal as the anti-lock brakes violently locked up. The smell of burning rubber instantly filled the cabin as the tires skidded across the asphalt. The sudden explosive deceleration turned the car into a kinetic trap. The creature, totally unrestrained in the back seat, was violently launched forward. It smashed into the center console with a horrific wet crunch of breaking bones, shattering the plastic air vents before tumbling into the front passenger footwell. The car shuddered to a violent halt, stalling out sideways across the yellow dividing line of the empty highway. I didn't wait to see if the impact killed it. I ripped my seatbelt off, threw my door open, and practically fell out onto the rough asphalt. The desert air was freezing. I scrambled to my feet and ran blindly into the pitch-black wasteland, away from the glowing headlights of my car. I ran until my lungs burned, and the sharp desert brush tore my jeans to shreds. I tripped over a shallow ravine and tumbled down into the dry dirt, scrambling backward until my spine hit the cold surface of a boulder. I huddled in the absolute darkness, my chest heaving, desperately trying to silence my own panicked breathing. From the highway, maybe 100 yards away, I heard the heavy metallic sound of my car door opening. Crunch, crunch. Footsteps on the gravel shoulder. Then, echoing through the dead silence of the Nevada desert, a voice called out into the dark. "David!" it yelled. It was my voice, but it was laced with a terrifying, unnatural grief. "David, where are you? Please, come back to the car. I'm hurt." It was imitating my pain. It was using my own empathy as a lure. "Please, someone help me," the voice screamed from the darkness near the highway. "Elena, call Elena." I pressed my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut. The psychological torture of hearing my own voice beg for my wife in the middle of nowhere was worse than the physical fear. The creature was hunting by sound, pacing back and forth along the asphalt, waiting for me to make a noise, waiting for me to try and run. Crunch, crunch. The footsteps stepped off the gravel and into the dry brush. It was moving away from the car. It was coming into the desert. I searched the ground frantically in the pitch black, my fingers brushing against a heavy, jagged piece of sandstone. I gripped it tight. If it found me, I would fight until my last breath, but I knew I couldn't overpower something that could reshape its own bones. Suddenly, a low, vibrating hum began to tremble through the ground beneath me. I opened my eyes and looked toward the highway. Far off in the distance, cutting through the suffocating blackness, were three bright, glowing amber lights. A massive 18-wheeler was barreling down Route 50. The creature saw it too. My voice abruptly stopped screaming. I heard the frantic rustle of the brush as it sprinted back toward the road, realizing my abandoned car was blocking both lanes. This was my only chance. I scrambled out of the ravine and sprinted toward the approaching headlights, waving my arms frantically and screaming at the top of my lungs. The truck driver saw the sideways sedan blocking the road and laid on his deafening air horn, slamming on his brakes. The massive rig hissed and shuddered, coming to a halt just 30 feet from my wrecked car. I ran directly to the illuminated cab of the truck, climbing onto the running board and pounding furiously on the driver's window. "Help me! Open the door, please! You have to get me out of here!" The driver, a burly man with a thick beard, took one look at my torn clothes and bleeding face, unlocked the passenger door and yelled, "Get in!" I dove into the elevated cab and locked the door behind me. "Drive," I screamed, pointing at the shoulder of the road. "Go around it. Just go." The driver didn't ask questions. He threw the heavy rig into gear, the engine roaring as he carefully maneuvered the massive truck onto the dirt shoulder, completely bypassing my abandoned car. As the truck slowly passed my sedan, the headlights washed over the driver's side window. Standing right beside my open car door, bathed in the glaring light, was the creature. The impact had mangled its left arm, which hung at a sickening, inverted angle. Its face, my face, was bruised and covered in dark blood, but it wasn't looking at the truck driver. It was staring directly up at me in the passenger seat. It didn't look angry. As the truck rolled past, the creature raised its unbroken, impossibly long right hand and slowly waved goodbye. I rode in the cab of that truck all the way to the state police barracks in Ely. I told them a drifter had tried to carjack me. They found my car the next morning, completely abandoned on the highway. There was no blood inside, and the dashboard camera had been entirely ripped out of the console. I quit driving that same day. I refused to go out at night, and I installed heavy deadbolts on every door in my house. But the real nightmare didn't start until 2 weeks later. My phone rang at 3 a.m. The caller ID was a restricted number. When I pressed the phone to my ear, the line was completely silent for 5 seconds. Then, a voice whispered from the other end, I love you too. See you in the morning.